All right. Well, hey, everybody. Looking forward to another webinar with you from Elevate Leadership Coaching. And today I'm going to be talking with you about this leadership concept of selflessness. So I'm going to share my screen with you real quick, and we're going to get right into this. And I'm so excited about what we're going to be sharing. I'm going to cut myself from the video, but hopefully you can still hear my audio. So here we go. We're going to talk about selflessness, which I believe is an imperative leadership quality. But let's first off ask the question, what is selflessness? Well, here's how I'm going to define selflessness for our time together. Selflessness is two parts: thinking and acting in a way that places the good of others ahead of oneself. Now, I want to focus in on this idea of thinking and acting. First of all, it's thinking. In other words, it starts in the mind. Selflessness starts inside of our mind. And it's having this propensity to consider the good of others ahead of oneself. So I believe it resides and starts in the mind, but it can't just stop there. Selflessness isn't just something you think about. It's something you actually live out and carry out. And that's where the acting out part comes in. It has to be tangible. And the acting part of selflessness really is making tangible sacrifices for the betterment of other people, betterment of others. And here's a quote that I really like: selflessness will always require sacrifice. And it will. It always requires some kind of sacrifice. If there's no sacrifice involved, then it's really not selflessness, in my opinion. So sacrifice of what exactly? You might say, well, Zach, what does that mean that I have to sacrifice in order to be selfless? What does that look like? Well, let me give you 3 examples of what a leader might have to sacrifice in order to be selfless. The first thing is time, concept of time. I once worked for a pastor, and he had been doing ministry for well over 30 plus years. I was brand new in my early 20s, and I remember that while he had an immense amount of experience, I had very, very little. And I just remember that I would go into his office sometimes multiple times a day to talk with him and ask questions and try to figure out what it meant to be a ministry leader. And as I didn't know it at the time necessarily, but looking back, I think about all the time that he spent with me that he could have been doing other stuff. He could have been focusing on other things, and instead he would take time, again, multiple times a day sometimes, in order to really coach me and help me and talk through things with me. And it was a sacrifice of his time, and it was selfless. As I look back, what a selfless leader he was in order to give up of his time for me. Selfless leaders harness the power of inconvenience. I love this quote. Selfless leaders understand that there's actually a power that comes when they give up their time and when they harness that inconvenience. It was inconvenient probably for him to meet with me multiple times, but he did it because I believe he understood in the big picture, while it may have been inconvenient for him, it was actually doing big things for me. That's the first area that selfless leaders sacrifice. The second is spotlight. Spotlight. Selfless leaders sacrifice the spotlight. And I think a great example of this, let me read this quote first. Selfless leaders take the currency of praise and dole it out generously. Selfless leaders take the currency of praise and dole it out generously. And really what that means is this: selfless leaders are not hungry and hanging on to and trying to put the spotlight on themselves. They're trying to always deflect it to other people. And I got a little ahead of myself, but an example of that is this guy right here, Peyton Manning. I grew up in Denver, had the opportunity to watch him when he played for the Broncos. And this guy, almost every time after a game, he'd be interviewed by a news reporter, and they would, of course, compliment him on his amazing performance. And man, this guy always was deflecting the spotlight. Rather than put the praise on himself, he was always deflecting it. Oh man, you know what? I couldn't have done it without this guy. Oh man, this guy made a great catch. Couldn't have done it without the offensive line. Always trying to deflect the spotlight, selflessly putting it on other people. That's what selfless leaders do. They sacrifice that spotlight because they want others to be seen for what their contribution is. And they understand and realize that it's not all about them. Third area that selfless leaders sacrifice is this amazing thing called ego. Oh, ego. Selfless leaders allow their egos to take a punch. They allow their egos to take a punch, and that really hurts sometimes. And part of this is this, in the last point I said that selfless leaders deflect the spotlight of praise. Well, another thing that selfless leaders do is they actually own the spotlight of critique. Rather than deflecting critique onto others, they own it. And that and many other ways are ways that selfless leaders take a gut punch to their ego. They realize, listen, it's not all about me. And when it comes to my leadership, I'm not going to let somebody else get thrown under the bus. I'm not going to pass the buck and pass the blame around. You know what? Sometimes I'm just going to have to take the hit on things when they don't go well or they didn't go the way that they were supposed to. Selfless leaders are willing to do that. They're willing to let their ego get rocked a little bit for the sake of others. Now, through sacrifice, however, it's not all bad. It's not all bad at all, because through sacrifice, that's how selfless leaders actually earn some things that are pretty phenomenal. And we're going to go through a few of those right now. First off, selfless leaders earn respect. When they sacrifice, they absolutely earn the respect of the people that follow them. Second thing they earn, I believe, is they earn a greater joy. They earn a greater joy. Too many leaders are just out for themselves, so focused on themselves and their accomplishments. And sometimes, man, I think that can just lead to feeling miserable in leadership. I think that can lead to just, when you're so self-absorbed, there's no joy. But when you're selfless, there's an actual joy that comes with it. And finally, kind of going along with that is, I believe that when leaders sacrifice, they actually are given the gift of more peace of mind. When a leader gets out of the rat race, and when a leader gets out of the idea of always trying to promote themselves and make themselves great, I just think that eases a leader and just gives them peace of mind, knowing, you know what, I'm in this to make others great. I'm in this to sacrifice of myself. And really, they earn a peace of mind by doing that. So let's talk about this just to end this webinar up a little. We're going to talk about 3 practical ways to practice selflessness. I think you can get better at this. If you're not great at it, I think you can get better. So let me give you 3 little practical tips that can help you in practicing this. Number 1, take an others inventory. This is something you can do right now after this webinar is done. Literally, grab a sheet of paper and a pen or a pencil, and here's how you take the others inventory. Here's what you do. You think about the people who are around you that you have influence over. So if you're a boss and you have people working for you, those are the people. If you're not in a supervisory role in that kind of sense, but you have people around you that you have influence over, write them down. And then here's what you do. The others inventory is this. You write down their name, and then by their name, you write down, what's one way that I can help make them better? What's something that I can do for them that will make them great? How can I add value into their life? Now, this is a great step because it's a practical means of turning the spotlight off of yourself and onto other people. And when you start doing this, and when you really start thinking about how you can be a benefit and blessing to others, you're actually practicing selflessness. You're practicing selflessness. So take the others inventory and see what comes of it. And don't just write a name down and write something down. Actually try to follow through on it. Come up with a plan for how you're actually going to do that for that person. Second practice you can do is to credit share as often as possible. Credit sharing is such a big, big deal. First of all, you can credit share by praising the accomplishments of others often. Be a person who is intentionally looking for ways that you can praise other people for what they're doing. Show gratitude for the contribution of others. If you've worked on a project or you've worked on some kind of event and you have a team doing it, let's say that you're the person in charge of it, listen, don't take all the spotlight for yourself. Credit share as much as you can. Show gratitude, public gratitude, verbal, out loud gratitude for the contribution of others. And then listen, you credit share by always making it about the team. Always make it about the team. Always make it about that other person who did that thing that really helped bring it all together. Always make it about the team. Never make it about yourself. Last but not least, a way that you can practice selflessness is this idea of being open to interruption. Be open to interruption. In other words, be generous with your time. Be generous. Be willing to take the time that's needed to spend it with somebody who needs it. That example that I gave of that pastor who would give hours of his time for me, sometimes multiple times a day, to coach me, to help me, that made a tremendous difference in my life. I love this quote. A selfless interruption of your time might cost you in minutes, but it could earn you years. Here's what I think that means. You know, sometimes we don't want to take the time with somebody because we're afraid of what we're going to miss out on, or, I could be doing this other thing during that time. But what it might cost you in minutes, it could actually earn you years in the sense of years of value poured into that person's life. Not only that, years of loyalty and years of respect that you will garner and earn from that person. Well, that's the end of this webinar. I wanted to make it short and sweet for you, and I hope that this has put this idea of selflessness on your mind and that you'll start practicing it even more as a leader. Before we go, I want to tell you about a couple other resources that might be helpful for you. First of all, number one, would love to have you check out my ebook, The Enemies of Influence, 4 Leadership Myths That People Buy Into. It's a quick little ebook, and it's really, I think it packs a punch. I'm talking about 4 myths that people buy into and how you can overcome those. You can find that on Amazon. It's a really cheap little book, maybe a great Christmas present, or just a gift for somebody who's maybe younger in leadership and maybe just starting to emerge as a leader. This would be a great thing to help them so that they can go further in their leadership and not get held up by some of those things that hold people back. Other resource I want to make you aware of is Everyday Youth Pastor. For those of you who are in ministry watching this, we have a resource out called Everyday Youth Pastor. We help youth pastors win through leadership and messaging resources. You can visit us at everydayyouthpastor.org. And this site is really geared for people in ministry, obviously, especially youth pastors, but really it can apply to anybody in ministry. And we have some amazing leadership coaching videos on there where we talk to you about leadership principles that are really geared specifically for folks in ministry. So I would love for you to take a look at some of that stuff, and hopefully it would be a great, great blessing to you. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and come back now, and hopefully you'll see my face in just a moment. Here I am. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I so appreciate it. If you would like more resources, visit those places. Follow me on Instagram at Zach Malito, and always putting content out there, always trying to resource you to help you win in your life and your leadership. Talk to you soon.